Now that the living vampire has had his big screen debut and we know that the Daywalker is slowly marching towards the MCU himself, I've got Marvel vampires on the mind, and so should you. Because as it turns out, there are a lot more of them than people might actually realize. Some are classic, some are more supervillainy, and others are just plain weird. But all of them could potentially be on Blade's hit list. Oh, and by the way, Deacon Frost is not in this video. You had your turn, buddy. Let the other kids play for a bit. Now, of course, we just can't have a vampire video without having the big cheese on the list. Dracula. Yep, the same one from that classic Bram Stoker novel from way back in 1897. Honestly, I'm not even sure what to do with this entry. I mean, what can I possibly tell you about Dracula that you don't already know? He is naturally the strongest of all Marvel vampires, and ever since his debut in Tomb of Dracula #1 in 1972, when comics were allowed to adapt horror characters again, he has battled just about everyone in the Marvel universe you can possibly think of. He currently resides in Chernobyl, which he has declared the new vampire kingdom. Because just in case normal vampires weren't scary enough, now we have radioactive vampires. Yeah, sweet dreams. Really, for Dracula's long history in Marvel Comics, anything I can say about him becomes pointless when I remind you that, well, he's Dracula. Of course he's a big deal. A big enough deal that he's already been seen in Blade Trinity and a few cartoons anyway, so much like Deacon, he's already had his turn. It's probably more interesting to talk about the people related to Dracula, like the people he's turned or his children. So I think I'm gonna. One of the most famous vampires in Marvel Comics would have to be Baron Blood, and he does have a pretty good claim to fame, considering he has fought Captain America both during World War II and in modern day. To back up a bit, Baron Blood was originally a man named John Falsworth who was so fascinated by vampire mythos that he actually sought out Dracula on purpose. And I'm sure you can guess how well that turned out. Now a vampire himself, John took to calling himself Baron Blood and joined the Germans in both World Wars, battling both the British super team the Freedoms 5 and the Invaders, of which Captain America was a member back in the day. Their first modern day battle happened when Baron Blood was resurrected by an agent of Dracula known as Charles Cromwell and started to terrorize his aging brother. Baron Blood then later fought Sam Wilson when Baron Zemo tried to use him as part of a plan to, get this, sterilize the entire population of Earth. Yeah, that was a whole thing. Now, with his bat costume and his colorful codename, he might not be the best fit for a Blade movie, but if he's not gonna fight Blade, then maybe he could fight Sam instead. Come on, Captain America having a mid-air battle with a vampire? What's not to love about that? I think any franchise that has supernatural characters in it is like legally obligated to feature at least one sexy lady named Lilith. And, well, Marvel is no different. Lilith Drake was born out of a forced marriage between a pre-vampire Dracula and a human woman named Sophia, all arranged by Vlad's father. Because no, not even Dracula is immune to getting bossed around by his dad. Dracula hated both of them from the start and was quick to kick them out of the castle, resulting in Sophia killing herself and Lilith ending up in the care of a Romani woman named Gretchen. Growing up hating her father, Lilith was later turned into a vampire thanks to a spell cast by Gretchen in order to be a thorn in Dracula's side after he became a vampire. Ever since then, Lilith has made it her mission to screw up Dracula's operations, and she especially likes to snatch away his targets from right underneath his nose. Well, that is when she isn't out punishing criminals who bring harm to women. Yeah, she's a real sisters before misters kind of gal, this one. Interestingly, since Lilith's vampirism is magical in nature, she doesn't actually have many of the usual vampire weaknesses. This, combined with her hatred of Dracula, could potentially make her an interesting femme fatale counterpart to Blade, perhaps giving them a sort of Catwoman-Batman dynamic. Just an idea. And since we're on the subject of Dracula's crotch gremlins, let's take a look at another vampire with daddy issues. Xarus. Xarus didn't think his dad was doing a very good job at leading the vampires of the world. So, in what can best be described as the vampire equivalent to Teenage Rebellion, Xarus decided to do something about it, and allied himself with a number of vampire sects, conspiring to stake and decapitate Dracula at the Centennial Meeting of Vampires. Not satisfied with just this, he then tried to take over the world by first converting all mutants into vampires, which naturally led to a big confrontation with the X-Men. Both Jubilee and Wolverine managed to get turned, but they're totally fine nowadays. And that's because, and say it with me now, comic books are weird like that. One thing that makes Xarus notable is that he possesses a Lightbender amulet, which allows vampires to walk in daylight. This basically means that Blade would lose his advantage of being able to spend the daytime preparing and planning for a confrontation. That could certainly make him an interesting enemy. Okay, so spoiler warning for those that haven't seen Morbius yet, but if you have, take a second closer look at Milo. Because while he isn't exactly the same character, he is definitely inspired by Marvel's other living vampire, Hunger. As a former Hydra agent named Loxias Crown, this guy kidnapped our dear friend Morbius for the purpose of performing various experiments on him. Of course, this backfired. Morbius broke free and drained Loxias, resulting in him becoming a second living vampire and taking up the name Hunger. Living in the New York sewers and repeatedly attacking the mutant group calling themselves Morlocks, he had a few run-ins with Spider-Man in the 90s, and old Webhead did team up with Blade in their last battle. So given the strange and convoluted relationship between the Sonyverse and the MCU, it doesn't seem completely impossible that the movie's Milo could potentially square up against our favorite Daywalker. Oh, you think Blade is the only good guy vampire out there? Think again, because here comes Hannibal King.
Do I pass the audition?
No, not that one. The comics Hannibal King. Hannibal used to just make a decent living as a private investigator until he went to London on a case and ended up getting bitten by Deacon Frost. Aw, man, he made it to the list after all. What a bastard. Anyway, King absolutely refused to let it get him down. He swore to never feed on humans and refused to even use his new powers while on cases, preferring to rely just on his own intellect. Really, to him, all being a vampire means is that he can only work night shifts. As for why the two would fight, well, it's comic books. The good guys always have to fight the first time they meet. Those are the rules. I don't make them, I just talk about them. It was discovering their mutual grudge against Deacon Frost that made the two work together, and since then they have partnered up quite a few times. And while personally I'd prefer to not see Frost in a new movie, the idea of Blade having a vampire-killing detective buddy is actually really cool. Just, please don't give us the Blade Trinity version again. I know he's what inspired Deadpool, and he's definitely the most memorable part of that movie, but, yeah, no, don't. Please?
You juggling thunder!
What do you do when you're destined to become a werewolf by the time you're 18? You double down and become a vampire too! That is what happened to Nina Price, the descendant of a man named Grigori who got his bloodline cursed to all become werewolves by the time of their 18th birthday. Just to top it all off, she was attacked by a vampire shortly before that happened, resulting in her turning into what is essentially any Underworld fan's wildest dream. Wait, is Underworld still relevant or did I just totally give away my age? Anyway, yes, on top of being a vampire, Nina becomes a white wolf under the full moon. But she does try her best to use it for good as a member of Nick Fury's Howling Commandos. Oh, and she just so happens to be the niece of one Jack Russell, the werewolf by night, who is also a descendant of Grigori. So maybe, just maybe, she's hiding out somewhere over in the Moon Knight series? Some of us are still hoping Jack Russell shows up eventually. It's possible. Way back before the Great Cataclysm, that is, the event that caused Atlantis to sink in the Marvel Universe, Varnae was a member of the Darkholders cult led by the shapeshifting undead wizard Tulsa Doom, known as a frequent enemy of Kull and Conan the Barbarian. After suffering some grave injuries, Varnae was transformed into the Marvel Universe's very first vampire by Atlantean sorcerers. This effectively makes Varnae the original king of vampires, and the one who turned good old Dracula in the first place. So yes, this vampire ape is a big deal, and you can't deny that he cuts a unique figure among comic book vampires. I mean seriously, how cool would it be for Blade to beat the villain of this new movie only for the original Big Daddy of vampires to show up and give us some awesome Daywalker versus vampire ape action? I would love to see that. Okay, now we're going old school. We're going so old school that I can't even find high quality scans of this comic. We're going all the way back to 1942 when Marvel was still known as Timely Comics and taking a look at their very first vampire character, Count Vicaro. Back in Marvel Mystery Comics number 35, Count Vicaro was enjoying his own life as a totally classic vampire lord. You know, just hanging out in his castle and snacking on abducted peasants from the nearby village as vampires do. That is until the costume crime fighter Thomas Holloway, going by the superhero name The Angel, rescued one of the Count's victims and ended up getting abducted himself. Of course, no Golden Age superhero is gonna take something like that lying down, and Angel battled Vicaro long enough for the sun to rise and turn him back into his human form. At which point Angel then shoved him into his coffin and set it on fire for good measure. Oh man! Remind me never to piss that guy off! Count Vicaro may never have been seen since, but with this one appearance, he laid the groundwork for all Marvel vampires to follow in his bloody footsteps. Okay, I know I hyped up Count Vicaro, but believe me, he doesn't even come close to approaching the sheer magnificence of the last vampire on this list. Just prepare yourself to bask in the unmatched glory of Bessie the Hellcow. One night back in the 1600s, when Dracula just couldn't find any humans to munch on, he resorted to sucking the blood of a nearby cow named Bessie. And as per vampire tradition, she came back 3 days later as a bloodthirsty bovine and set off to search for the creature that transformed her. But that's not the end. About 300 years later, she ended up catching the attention of none other than everyone's favorite foul-mouthed detective, Howard the Duck, who managed to drive a stake through Bessie's heart. But that's not the end either! Bessie was later captured by the mad scientist Dr. Kilgore, who tried drinking her milk in the hopes that it would make him immortal. When that didn't work, he then kidnapped Deadpool to try and reverse engineer his healing factor instead. But that's still not the end! As a result of this little adventure, Bessie is now a member of Deadpool Inc. and is outfitted with extra robot parts, which essentially make her a talking cyborg vampire cow. I'm sorry, how is that not the greatest thing anyone has ever heard? Seriously, Marvel, where is Bessie's Disney Plus show? I need like 3 seasons of this right now, 26 episodes each. Mark my words, I will not rest until Bessie is given her due. Hashtag Hellcow for Deadpool 3. Somebody get me Kevin Feige's phone number. I'm gonna make him turn Bessie into the centerpiece of Phase 5. You just watch me. My main question is though, do any of these vampires drink wine by any chance? I need to know whether or not Bela Lugosi has been lying to me all this time. Or maybe they prefer Hellcow milk. Actually, let's maybe not think too hard about that one.